Okay, let's see if this will work. I'm trying to do this stream by myself, so let's see. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm back. Um, I have a setup of an Allegro coffee bag that I really liked, and I thought it was a nice, simple subject just to try this all out. So you can see the painting, I sketched it out before just for my own sanity. And my palette's here. And now you can actually see me, which is kind of weird in my really messy room. Feel free to comment and ask any questions along the way. Hopefully this goes semi-smoothly. And if there's any issues with the sound or anything, you can also let me know. So what I'm going to do, since I have this all sketched out, the reason why I sketched it out first is because if I have the paper up like this is how I see it, so it's not super skewed. But if I draw it on the table as I see it, then it's going to appear very long. So it's important to be facing it vertically. So I sketched it out just so the proportions aren't super wacky and that you can see the actual painting. Oh yeah, I'm not painting on a coffee bag. And I'm glad the sound is so much better. I'm so sorry it was so bad before. I'm actually hooked up onto my computer this time, so I think it'll go a lot better. And I have full control of everything, so that's kind of awesome. So what I'm gonna do, this scene is pretty kind of dull. It's got like a just overall brown, white, and maybe a little bit of blue in it. There's not a ton of color. So I'm just going to start with these earthy, more saturated tones of the bag. And there's a little bit of blue because it's not pure orange. Mixing it well. And it's pretty watery. And I am going to just lay down the lights, the parts where the light is hitting the bag and where it's more saturated. As the shadow hits the bag, it becomes a little more blue and desaturated. So we will want to kind of maintain this bright, warm color. I'm just looking for all the spots where the light's hitting. And then there's a little bit on this spoon, a little bit of a reflection in there, which is kind of nice. And I'm going to go a little bit darker using some yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. Still keeping it pretty watery. I want to add a little more red, just a touch. And I'm squinting and just looking for the overall shape of the bag and the main values that I'm seeing. My table isn't too sturdy, so it's a little wobbly. I'll go ahead and there's a nice shadow right under here. Oh, the painting's upside down. Crap. Okay, that is a big issue. Let me see what I can do. 1 second. See if I can turn. Like that? Yeah, that should work. Okay, thank you for telling me. I am trying to figure this all out on my own. Well, with John's help too, but this trial run is more on my own a little bit. No, definitely do not be afraid to tell me if something's wrong. I like to think that I take criticism pretty well. Okay, so we have the bag pretty much in there. I want to cover up all these little white spots. And I'm adding a little bit of black just to get this spoon blocked in. And I'm squinting and just trying to break it down in my mind as shapes. So I have this shadow shape, and then I have a little shadow shape over here. And I'm always comparing angles too. So the angle of the spoon, I kind of take my brush and kind of look to see if it matches, and then translate it over to my painting. And I'm always looking at angles too, so it's important to pay attention to the angle of the bottom of this bag and this little wedge of white between the spoon and the bag. By doing all these little things, it really will help your drawing overall. Let's get some of these shadows in here. There's these really bright blue shadows because it's right next to a window, so there's a little bit of this blue kind of scattered all on the painting, which I like. A little bit of that over here. And then it's a little bit darker. And desaturated. So to desaturate it, sometimes I put in a little bit of burnt sienna with my ultramarine blue. It's a nice kind of complement to it. So I'm also looking for my kind of darkest darks, or at least, you know, close to the right values that I want. And I'm squinting, so it's actually a little bit darker than what I had in there initially. was way too potent. Kind of gets darker right here where the bag is folding. And right at the bottom of the bag is pretty dark as well, where it's touching the ground. I'm going to put a little bit of warmth into the spoon. I wasn't sure. What do you think about the setup that I have? Do you have any feedback? Do you like seeing me like paint on this view? Or is it not really necessary? I'm really curious to know. Because I first thought that it wasn't really necessary, but it can be kind of nice just to get a different view every now and then. I love all these wrinkles in the bag. It's not quite that dark. Ah, great. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to see the scale, get a feel for it. Glad you like it. I would love to be able to figure out how to do this better as a more portable thing, but I think for now I'm just going to have to compromise a little bit and have like a more permanent station for the live streams. So I'm using pure black pretty much for this. It has some unintentionally mixed colors in there. But you can really use this to define the silhouette of the object. And when you're working bigger, you can extend the paint a little bit by making it more watery. That's what I do usually. I've noticed that more people are starting to work larger in gouache, which is kind of cool. But for a while it wasn't very common. This is just a 8x10 though, so it's nothing too big. I think I want to, I'll keep it that way. Hopefully this bag doesn't change too much. It shouldn't, but sometimes things move around a little more than you expect. Yeah, I can tell you how I did it. A lot of the credit goes to my husband, who did some of the research. Technology tends to just go right over my head. And even setting up this, I had to ask him to come in a lot to help me. But he found a really good system, and it's actually with a software called OBS, and I really like it. It's pretty intuitive. There might be a little more of a learning curve if you uh, don't do a lot with technology, but luckily, since I worked in the gaming industry, I'm kind of used to working in Photoshop and a bunch of different programs. So it's pretty intuitive to me. Um, and there's so many things that you can do with it. If you look up tutorials on YouTube for OBS, just tutorials, you can see what it's capable of. A lot of people use it for Twitch. You didn't like the Holbein gouache. Holbein might be one of my favorites. Um, I don't use it that often though, so I guess I shouldn't talk too much. I just have a few colors, but to me it seemed pretty comparable to um, Winsor Newton, like very pigmented, and it did have similar issues where some would get like super rock solid and then some were very watery kind of consistency, which is annoying. And I have the same issues with Winsor and Newton. If the consistency is an issue, I really like M. Graham, and their paint is mixed with a honey. So the consistency overall is very, very good, very even. But they don't have quite as big of a variety of colors. So, you know, give and take. Adding a little bit of blue at the bottom of this, just because I think it's reflecting some of the light from the white table, which is just a pad of paper. Oh, thank you. Elaine? Elaine, is that how you say it? I worked mobile games, so I worked at Zynga for a while, and then at Storm 8, and then Jam City. So, not like any hardcore games, just the cutesy little match threes and stuff. Yeah, M. Graham is good. I like their paints. I use them the most, and Winsor and Newton, I love the variety of colors. So even though their consistency drives me insane, I still buy them um, quite a bit compared to a lot of brands. I'm surprised that you had such a problem with Holbein though, with the lawn ugly stage. Can you be more specific about what the problem was? Maybe I can help you kind of troubleshoot what the issue is. So you can tell I'm not even mixing in new colors. I'm kind of just using what's there and, mixing around for finding what works. Just trying to see all the different planes going on, since it's a very crinkled old bag, and that's kind of what drew me to it. I want to make sure I get it kind of correct. You don't think that Winsor & Newton has quality control? Oh, you were at Twitch. That's cool. I was just looking at Twitch yesterday, kind of trying to do some research on this all, and it looks like a really fun community. I don't know if it's quite for me. I am not a gamer at all, which, you know, is kind of funny that I was in the gaming industry for so long, but oh yeah, portrait work is always tough. I um I would start with just like still lifes or something because it's a little more forgiving. You're not worried about having moving subjects and having to get an exact likeness. I'm looking for the lightest lights right now, and the bag is kind of a brown, so I'm adding a little bit of red. And I just want to create a little more texture in here, so it's not just, oops, too much. So it's not just the same kind of even tone all the way around. Everything's just kind of wavy. The shadows are wavy. It's all crinkly. I do want to cover up that brown that I put in, just because it's going to stand out a little bit too much. Oh, wow. That's so cool. As far as Winsor & Newton, I feel like their pigments are the most packed, but I the consistency of the paint is all over. I have a feeling it's more of a chemical thing because it's always the same colors that have, you know, more issues. Like their cadmium orange would get all over my palette, and always the earthy colors like burnt umber, alizarin crimson would turn hard as rock, which is pretty common, I think. I think Holbein has the same issue, so it might just be something chemically. I don't think it's really a quality thing, but I am not sure. I just know I like their paints, but they do annoy me. I hate the consistency being all over the board. I just know what colors do that and I avoid it. So I don't get alizarin crimson anymore, or if I use a cadmium orange, which I don't anymore either, but I would just do a little bit at a time and then wipe it completely from my palette. Otherwise, it's just going to get into everything. That's really cool that you co-founded that, though. Yes, I am using gouache. And this is an Arches cold press watercolor block, which, you know, I think down the line I'm going to be able to figure out a cool system where you can see it on the screen and I can just like push a little button and it'll say what I'm using. Right. I do love Rembrandt oil paints. They are my favorite, but quite expensive. And I do feel like there is a lot more additives, which, makes you kind of go through those tubes pretty quickly, and they're expensive, so it's a tough balance. I feel like I'm going crazy. My drawing's off a little bit. Probably too much talking for me. Not discouraging anyone from starting conversations. I actually really like having them. Alright, so I am going to add, let's get this spoon in. I also use a Turner Design Gouache, and my friends are always the one kind of pointing out that I have a palette with them at Jerry's Artorama. I don't know why I'm so shy about that kind of stuff. But so I have quite a few of these colors are the Turner Design Gouache. And their consistency is really great. I think there might be a little more additive because it's all kind of slightly more runny, but not runny. It's just not like super packed like some Winsor & Newton colors are. But I really like them, and I like the tubes a lot. Let me show you. Sorry to anyone that watches a lot of my videos because I pretty much go over the same things a lot, but it's all pretty important. So these are the Turner Design Gouache, and the tubes are a little bit bigger and they're cheaper, so I think you get a good amount of value for these things. And then I have a lot of Winsor & Newton. These are the cadmium-free ones. I'm trying to avoid using any cadmiums because of the toxicity. Sorry, I can't talk. And then I was going to do a little white test. So I have 3 different whites here, actually. I have M Graham white. Sorry, still figuring out the camera. This one is a Holbein white, which I like the best. And I have some Winsor & Newton white. I use all permanent white. I don't like zinc white. Zinc white, it's supposed to be better for mixing, but I like permanent or titanium. Yeah, I agree. I agree about the Turner gouache, but I think it's a pretty decent gouache, especially if you're just starting out. Like some of their package deals are really good. And I don't recommend spending a lot if you're just starting out because a lot of people do get frustrated with gouache. Mainly because of the changing values and it dries too fast. A lot of people are used to using oil paints. Oh yeah, we don't have Jerry's Artorama here either. I think it's all over kind of east, but I order everything online. In big batches. I just got another giant box. I like to get a lot of cat hair in my paintings. Adds a little bit of texture, some charm. Oh, you're in Dallas. I'm surprised they don't have Blix there. Where I live in Concord, California, we don't have any art stores either. I have to go to Oakland, basically. We have Michael's or Hobby Lobby, which I'm not going to go to. Um, but yeah, it does kind of suck. That's why I order everything online. I also hate shopping and going to stores, but I should be supporting small businesses more. Yeah, the Blicks are pretty expensive. And even when they say they're like matching the prices online, I feel like that isn't really true. I always end up spending so much money when I go to their stores. I want to get these dark bits, especially right under here. I'm not going to put in the writing. I used to do that a lot, but I feel like it's not really necessary. I don't really want to be a realist. I kind of like lean more towards impressionism, I guess. Um, let's see here. What do I recommend when I paint? So when I paint, the gouache is somewhat transparent. I've been trying to use less water, but I think my brushes absorb a lot. And yeah, I always start out more watery and then I build up the paint. I think you'll start to see me using more pretty much straight paint without any water, but having just a tiny bit of water in there will help get a little more flow. By the end, my brushes are pretty caked up with paint, especially with like these highlights. I use almost straight white. I like to add just a touch of yellow to give it to some color, and then I apply it really thick for the really strong highlights that I want to pop. And I'll probably go back over them too and add another layer of thick paint. But I don't know if that answered your question. It is about kind of getting a better idea of the texture and consistency of paint. I think you do need to be using more paint. Make sure to not put like tiny dabs into your palette. So I noticed a lot of people when I did workshops, they'd put like try to save the paint and put a little drop in there. And really, I fill the whole thing, so I'm not afraid to use more paint. Especially if you're a traditional watercolorist, this is a pretty common issue. People are timid about using a ton of paint. So I need to think of some kind of exercise to just encourage people to really pile on the paint. Yeah, I am glad there isn't a Jerry store here because I would be there all the time and spending all my money. I spend enough. I spend hundreds of dollars um, regularly at Jerry's online, and that's not even seeing like multiple products in front of me. Since there's a few light sources, there's actually a few shadows that I'm just now noticing. And for these things, you have to really pay attention to what's going on. So what I didn't notice before, and it might have changed because the light's kind of changing, but there's a cross shadow here, a warmer one. And I like doing these little details, and then it kind of blends out here this way. Maximum number of layers. Um, I try not to put too much in, and I have never had cracking issues. What I do try to do is keep it pretty watery for the most part, and only go thick where I know I want that color there. So even now it's still pretty watery. What you want to try to avoid doing is a lot of like scratching and fiddling. Just like do a brush stroke and move on. Because the more that your brush is kind of scratching at it, you're going to lift up those layers underneath it. So there's these warmer shadows from the backdrop, which I don't need to do, but I like doing these for fun. So there we go. And I do think the light is changing actually, because there's more stuff that I'm seeing. So I am going to add this kind of cool light coming in from the window, just because it adds a nice design element. I did stick up a little turquoise in the corner, which probably wasn't necessary. And it kind of blends warmer as it gets closer to me. But putting this kind of cooler color right next to this warmer shadow is gonna look really nice and help make the warmth kind of like stand out more. It's kind of cool stuff going on. Gonna add a little bit of this blue. When I started, there was a blue kind of going all the way around the edge, like a rim lighting almost. I want to add a little bit of there, even though I don't really see it anymore, just because I liked how it looked. There's that reflected light bouncing up. I'm trying to pay closer attention now to the very subtle shifts. Alright, let's work on this shadow color here. It's a little bit lighter. Made it too dark. I try to avoid using really pure colors also. So if I'm using what looks like pure blue, it's actually probably a mixture. You can kind of soften some edges with your fingers, and it gets a little bit lighter towards the edge. What gave it more dimension? Sorry, I missed when you posted that. Was it just this here, or let's see, what else can I do? I'm gonna work on kind of cleaning up the silhouette around here. This is cooler light. The spoon shape is kind of wonky. Oh yeah, doing that is always a quick and easy way to kind of give form. That's why you see a lot of concept artists have like the rim light around a character. Looks dramatic and really gives it a three-dimensional look. Time to add more detail. It's always tricky trying to find these colors in a dull object. Kind of having some sharper edges helps give it that kind of crinkled look. Also having some points where it's really light right against a really dark area gives it a look that it's like a sharper edge. So right here, it's right next to this lighter color is right next to that darker blue. So you can imagine it's kind of punched in a little bit. It's also important to kind of vary your line work or brush strokes. Like you don't want everything to be the same. So I try to mix it up with some thinner lines and thicker lines. So you can see this fold in the bag cutting across. Doesn't really look like a coffee bag. It's kind of just a lunch bag. Oh well. Maybe I will put those letters on there. Or a hint of it. That might be a good exercise. Um, you know, I think a lot of the issues people have with shifting colors is really how you layer it. So I'm very careful, and I learned this over years. Like when I first started, it definitely shifted a lot, and I was doing a lot of things wrong. So kind of learning how the colors react to each other and how to layer them really helps with the shifting colors. I know that other gouache artists like Mike Hernandez and Tiffany Main, they work very thick, and I watched a demo at the plein air convention of his, and he was saying use thicker paint and you'll have less change, which I think is true. Like the more water you have in it, and it's gonna dry a totally different value. But I just like working this way personally. Okay, I'm working pretty slow today. Kind of just enjoying the moment. I like chatting with everyone. There's a bit of reflection onto this spoon. But another thing to note is that I go over things constantly. Like I don't just put down the paint once and call it good. I kind of keep repeating until I get the value that I want. Oh, thank you. Sometimes I get pretty quiet because I'm in focus mode, but I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. When I squint, this highlight is definitely the brightest. So I'm always comparing like where's the darkest darks and where are the lightest lights and shifting everything around to meet the middle. Oh yes, thank you. I would love that. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. I want to get the shape of this curve. I'll make sure I get the shape of the spoon right as well. I think I'm gonna try to get a little bit of it and maybe not each letter. I don't know. Is that something you're all interested in seeing? Yeah, why not? Let's just do it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm probably not gonna do every letter, and I don't want it to stand out super dark. So I'm gonna start with kind of like a lighter gray, a little bit of this brown, so it shows the bag is going through the ink. And I always start with kind of the middle letter, which is the E. And go about here. And then I just kind of block in general shapes. Gets a little bit darker in the shadow. And for the G, also dark in the shadow. And I might go over, um, with the bag color again to cover up any spots like this. So try to not think of them as letters and just shapes. And once you have the basic kind of fit in there, you can go and fine tune things. So I'm gonna kind of cut this out a little bit. Oh, you're welcome. I hope it helps. So I don't know. I'm gonna work on the line underneath it. Doing this black line is also going to help give it form, as well as under here. We have some letters over here. I just want to hint at it though. I don't want it to be super readable. Just kind of get the general shapes and colors in there. And change the value of the ink as well. So it's going to be lighter where the light's hitting, darker where it's in shadow. You can kind of make sure that it's kind of tucked under there. It's actually a darker, kind of warmer shadow here. I didn't notice before. The shadow is looking a little bit dark. So I want to lighten it a little bit. I'm going to put in the coffee letters too. I'm using my small round, and then I'm going to start in the middle again. Kind of seeing where the F falls underneath these letters, like how far it is under the L, how far it goes under the E. Same for this F. So I'm going to go with the bigger brush, just faster. This E is kind of rotated this way from the angle of the bag. O's are my least favorite letter to paint. Oh, thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. I'm going to work on these letters, kind of fine tune them a little bit, get the font somewhat correct. And I just want to make sure that the values of the letters are correct. And kind of sharpen up some of these points. You can use this flat to your advantage. To get nice straight lines and crisp edges. So it's been about an hour now. I want to, I'm just going to go all the way. I really like the handwriting on the bag. So why not? I love contradicting myself. I was just saying how I'm not a realist. That's okay. I don't care as much about starting from the center for this because it's a handwritten part. It doesn't need to be perfect. It says French roast. But this part's kind of crinkled so you can barely see the FRE. And I still am kind of comparing, like, where does the C fall under the ORG? Someone's handwriting is being in a painting now, but they weren't expecting that. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing as with the other letters, and I want to make sure that the values of these letters are kind of fine-tuned. I'm lightening up this part where it's kind of coming up. The bag is getting reflected light. And it also kind of pushes these elements back. I don't want them to stand out super, like, be super contrasty. So the last thing I think I want to do, well, no, there's a couple things. Let me clear off my palette real quick. and kind of, I use this as an opportunity to wet my paints again too. People have a tendency to let their paints dry, and it hurts my heart. It always feels good to get a nice clean palette. Good enough. I want to add these highlights again, or go over them. And then I also want to, actually I want to fix, I always do this. I want to get some of this bag worked on a little bit. There's some darker parts in here that are kind of nice. There's also this part here, which is kind of like a sharper bit. So again, it's where you have like a really light part right next to a really dark part that gives it some dimension. I don't know if I want it to be quite that white. And now since I had splash, there's tons of little dots on there. I don't know if you can see. Um, this is when I go back into the black. And this is partly why I use the black as the background sometimes, because it's just easy. I don't have to mix it perfectly. Anyone that works with gouache knows that it's so impossible to get the exact same flat background color. So this kind of takes the guesswork out of it. But you have to be careful. Since it's kind of a watery texture, if you are too rough, you're going to splash this all over as well. So you just be gentle. I usually look for opportunities where I can kind of push the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to kind of lift up with some of this just because I feel like I want to push back some of these sharper edges just a little, give it some wear. All right, and then the very last thing, this little clippy thing, the little wire part that you bend over. I really like that, so I'm gonna get that in there. So iconic for coffee bags. And again, a little bit of this backlight. My brush is super splayed. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I realized that was happening a little bit late, but I always love an opportunity when you can get those warms and cools right next to each other like that. So I think I'm done. This is a good little live stream. I'm glad that you liked the setup, and I had fun being able to see the comments and be able to respond to you all. Thank you all for giving me a little bit of company and feedback. I'm always open to hearing feedback. So you can email me or message me. You can go to my website for my email. But thank you so much for watching. And yeah, just let me know if you have any questions or anything you'd like to see change for future streams. Oh, awesome. All right, enjoy your coffee and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.